May we continue where we left off day before yesterday. Life, may one repeat what we said a little bit. We are not trying to convince you of anything. That must be clearly understood. We are not trying to persuade you to accept a particular point of view, nor try to impress you about anything. We're not doing any propaganda. That's dreadful. For and against and so on. We're not talking about personalities or who is right and who is wrong, but rather trying to think out together, which seems to be the most difficult thing to do. To observe together what the world is, what we are, what we have made of the world, and what we have made of ourselves. We are trying to together examine both the inward and the outward man, and to observe clearly, one must be free to look. If one clings to one's particular experience, opinion, judgment, prejudice, then it is not possible to think together. And the world crisis, which is right in front of us, demands, urges us to think together so that we can solve the human problem together. Not according to any particular person, to a particular philosopher, to a particular guru, to any particular person. We are trying, looking, observing together. And this is important to bear in mind all the time. That the speaker is merely pointing out and together examining it. So it's not one-sided, but rather cooperating together and examining, taking a journey together, and so act together. As we pointed out, our consciousness is not our consciousness, individual consciousness. This is very important to understand, because our consciousness is not only the specialized group, the national and so on, but also all the travail, the conflicts, the misery, the confusion, sorrow and so on. And we are examining together that consciousness, which is the human consciousness, which is our consciousness, not mine, but ours. Now, one of the factors that is demanded in this examination is that one has to have the capacity of intelligence. According to the dictionary meaning, intelligence means to discern, to understand, to distinguish. And also it means observing, gathering, putting it together, all that which have gathered, and act from that. Either that gathering, that discernment, that observation can be prejudiced, and therefore that intelligence is denied when there is prejudice. Right? And that intelligence, if one follows another, that intelligence is denied. Following another, however noble, however this or that, denies your own perception, denies your own observation. You are merely following somebody who will tell you what to do, what to think, and so on. And if you do that, that intelligence doesn't exist, because in that intelligence there is no observation. Intelligence demands doubt, questioning, not be impressed by persons, by their enthusiasm, by their energy. Intelligence demands that there must be impersonal observation. And intelligence is not only the capacity to understand that which is rationally explained verbally, but also it demands that you gather as much as information as possible, and knowing that information can never be complete about anybody, about anything. Therefore, where there is that intelligence, there is hesitation, rational, impersonal thinking, observation, and clarity of thinking. Intelligence also implies the comprehension of the whole of man, all his complexities, all his physical responses, his emotional reactions, his intellectual capacity, his affection, his travail, all that, to perceive all that at one glance and act, that is supreme intelligence. And intelligence has not so far been able to transcend conflict. Right? And we are going this morning together, see if it is possible if the brain can be freed from conflict. Because we have lived with conflict from the time we are born till we die. The constant struggle to be or to become. To become something, so-called spiritually, psychologically, or in the world, which is to become successful, to fulfill. That is the whole movement of becoming. I am this, but I will be that. And the ultimate reach is destination, direction, is towards the highest principle. Either whether that principle is called God, Brahman, or any other name one gives to it. This constant struggle to become or to be. Both are the same. When one is trying to become in various directions, then you are denying be. And when you try to be, you are becoming also. See this movement of the mind, of thought. I am, I think I am. And being dissatisfied with what I am, discontented with what I am, I try to fulfill in something or drive towards a particular direction. Pleasurable, however it may be painful, but at the end, pleasurable. So there is this constant struggle to be and to become. What is it that we are trying to become? All of us. Either physically, we want more money, better house, better position, more power, more money, a better status. Biologically, if one is not well, to become well. Psychologically, that is the whole inward process of thought, consciousness, the whole drive inwardly is from the perception or the recognition that one is nothing actually, but to become, move away from that through education, through university. If one is so-called lucky enough to go to any university, get a good career, job, that will give you position, money, etc. Psychologically, inwardly, there is always the escape from what is. Always running away from that which I am, with which I am dissatisfied, to something which will satisfy. Whether that is satisfaction is deep contentment, happiness, a projection of thought as enlightenment, as acquiring greater knowledge, This is the process of becoming. I am, I shall be. Right? That involves time. Now the brain is programmed to this. All our culture, all our religious sanctions, everything says become. You see this phenomenon all over the world. It's not only in this Western world, but in the Eastern, Far Eastern, West. Everyone is trying to become or be or avoid, and so on. Is this the cause of conflict? Inwardly and outwardly. Inwardly, there is this imitation, conformity, competition with the ideal. And also outwardly, there is this competition between so-called individuals with a group of the group against another group, nation against nation, and so on. So inwardly and outwardly, there is this drive to be and become something. And we are asking, is this the basic cause of our conflict? Or man is doomed forever, as long as he lives on this marvelous earth, doomed to perpetual conflict. One can rationalize this conflict. Say nature is in conflict. The tree struggling to reach the sun is in conflict. And that's part of our nature. Because through conflict, through competition, we have evolved. We have grown into this marvelous human beings that we are. This is not being said sarcastically. This is what most of us do think. So, our brain is programmed to conflict. And we have never been able to resolve this problem. You may neurotically escape into some fantasy and say, and hold on to that fantasy and totally be content. Or imagine that you have inwardly achieved something and be totally content with that. And any question, any doubt, any skepticism that must be exercised by an intelligent mind must question all this. why human beings, after millions and millions of years, from the time of beginning of man, we have lived with conflict. There are in those caves where man is fighting evil in the form of a bull or this or that. From the ancient times of the Sumerians, this has been conflict. The Egyptians and so on up to the present evolution of man, he has lived in conflict. We have accepted it. We have tolerated it. We have said it is part of our nature to compete, to be aggressive, to imitate, to conform, part of this everlasting pattern of conflict. Please, we are observing together. I am not, the speaker is not verbally putting a map of conflict and you accept that map, but rather together we are observing the conflict in ourselves and outwardly. Right? Since our brains have been programmed to this conflict, like a computer that's programmed, but the computer can learn. Can discover its own fallacies, its own mistakes, and correct it. A highest mathematician can inform or program the computer with all his theories and so on, and the computer, being so programmed, discovers new theorems. This has been proved. Not programmed by the professor. It has capacity to learn, to discover, which is a mechanical, perhaps, intelligence. They are trying to bring about ultra intelligence machine which goes far beyond our human brain. And our human brain has not solved this problem for ourselves, but the machine has solved it. You follow all this? So why has man, who is so highly sophisticated, in one direction and so utterly unintelligent in other direction? Does conflict end through knowledge? Please put these questions to yourself. Knowledge about knowing oneself, or knowledge about the world, knowledge about matter. The world, the society, learning more about society, better organizations, better institutions and so on. Will that solve our human conflict? Acquiring more and more knowledge. Or the freedom from conflict has nothing whatsoever to do with knowledge. You follow me? Please, together we are thinking this out. The speaker is not talking to himself. He can do that in his own room if he wants to. But together we are working this out. We have knowledge, great deal of knowledge about the world, matter, about the universe, and also a great deal of historical knowledge about ourselves. Whole history is the story of mankind. And if we know how to read that book, which is me, myself, my consciousness, I may have tremendous knowledge about myself. And will that knowledge free the human being from conflict? You understand? Please go along with it. Or it has nothing to do with analysis, discovering the various causes and factors of conflict. We can go into that. Will the cause or many causes and through analytical discovery, will that free the mind, the brain from conflict? Conflict not only while we are awake during the daytime, but also this conflict carried on while we are asleep. You can examine the dreams, interpret dreams, go into the whole nature of why human beings dream at all. And will that solve conflict? Will the analytical brain, analyzing very clearly, rationally, sanely the cause of conflict, there are many causes, many factors of conflict. Will that analysis end conflict? Analysis being not only time, but the analyzer separating himself from the object, which is conflict, and then try to analyze that conflict. So separating himself from conflict, will that solve it? Or it has nothing whatsoever to do it has nothing whatsoever to do with any of these processes. That is analysis, discovering the cause, and trying to force ourselves to be free from that cause, or through various examinations, acquiring great deal of knowledge about ourselves. Will that solve the problem of conflict? Or following somebody who says, I will show you the way. I am free from conflict, but I'll show you the way. Will that help you? This has been the part of the priest, part of the guru, part of the so-called enlightened man. Follow me, I'll show you. Or I'll point out, you go. And we have had all this through millennia upon millennia. History shows this. And yet man has not been able to solve that one deep-rooted conflict. Right? Let us together find out not a way, not a verbal indication, not an intellectual verbal concept. Let's find out together if there is a way, if there is a perception, an action that will end conflict, not gradually, end it immediately. You understand my question? Please first understand the question. What are the implications of that question? The brain being programmed or wired, programmed to conflict. It is caught in that pattern. You can see it for oneself. And we are asking if that pattern can be broken immediately, not gradually. Either you think to break it through drugs, through alcohol, through sex, through different forms of discipline, through different forms of handing oneself over to something. Man has tried 1,000 different ways to escape from this terror of conflict. Right? And we are asking, is it possible for a brain so conditioned to break that conditioning immediately? Right? This is maybe a theoretical, non-actual question, which that's impossible. It's just a theory, it's just a wish, a desire to be free of this. But if you examine the thing rationally, logically, which is part of our intelligence, time will not solve this conditioning. Right? That's the first thing to realize. Not tomorrow. There is no psychological tomorrow. I won't go into that for the moment. I'm just saying that implies time. If one sees actually, not verbally, deeply in one's heart, in one's mind, in one's very, very depth of one's being, time will not solve this problem. That means you have already broken the pattern, beginning to see the cracks in the pattern, because we have accepted time, right, as a means of unraveling, breaking up this programmed brain. So when you observe clearly that time under no circumstance will free the brain from time. We mean by time, as it is now conditioned, programmed. I will examine it, make efforts to break it, uncondition it. All that process involves time. Right? So when you do that, you are caught in the same pattern. You have not moved away from it. Right? But once you clearly for yourself see, absolutely, irrevocably, that time is not a fact, then already you begin to see the cracks in the wall in the enclosure of the brain, right? Are you doing it now? Because philosophers and scientists have said time is a factor of growth, biologically, linguistically, technologically. Time is necessary. But they've never gone, perhaps some may have, I don't know, we don't know, never inquired into the nature of psychological time. And this inquiry into time implies the whole psychological becoming. Right? I am this, but I will be that. I am unhappy, unfulfilled, desperately lonely, but tomorrow will be different. So, is our brain, which is common to all mankind, is not your brain. It may have certain peculiarities, tendencies, but this brain of mine and yours has evolved through time. It's not my brain. Biologically it is so, it's not my brain. And that brain has been evolving through centuries to come to this point through conflict. Right? Are we moving together? Do we see together the rationality of it? The logic of it? That our consciousness, not ours, but human consciousness, which we went into very carefully the other day. And to realize that it is the human consciousness, you've already broken the pattern of individual consciousness. Right? So if one realizes that time is a factor of conflict, right? then that very perception is action, is decision has taken place. You don't have to decide. The very perception is the action and decision. Right? You have to, please, we have to work together. It's not just you listen and I agree or disagree. We are working together. Now, there are multiple forms of conflict. As there are 1,000 opinions, so there are 1,000 ways of conflict. We are not talking about the many forms of conflict, but conflict itself. Not my particular conflict. I don't get on with my wife or with my businessman or this or that. But the conflict of the human brain in its existence. Hope you don't mind. Is there a perception? Please just first listen. You may agree or not agree afterwards, but just listen first. Is there a perception not born of memory, not born of knowledge, a perception that sees the whole nature of conflict, the whole nature, the nature and the structure of conflict, the perception of that whole? Is there such perception at all? You understand? Not analytical perception, not intellectual observation of the conflict, various types of conflict, nor an emotional response to conflict. But we are asking, is there a perception not of remembrance, which is time, which is thought? Is there a perception which is not of time or thought, which can see the whole nature of conflict, and that very perception is the ending of that conflict? That's my question to you. You understand the question? That is, thought is time, right? You see that? Thought. Thought is memory, knowledge, experience, put together in the brain as memory. All that is the result of time. I didn't know yet a week ago, but I know. And so on. The multiplication of knowledge, the expanse of knowledge, the depth of knowledge is of time. So thought is time. Right? Obvious. It's any movement, any psychological movement is time. Right? It's not, don't agree with me, it is so. If I want to go from here to Montreux, I must time. If I want to learn a language, time. If I want to meet somebody, At a distant place requires time. The time can be shortened or lengthened. And the same process, the outward process is carried inwardly. I am not, I will be. And the expanse of that. So, thought is time. Thought and time are indivisible. Can we go on? Do we see this fact? And we are asking a question. Is there a perception which is not time and thought? That perception entirely out of the pattern of the brain which has been accustomed to certain patterns, certain modes, certain ways. Clear? Is there such thing? And perhaps that alone is going to solve the problem. Right? Because we have not solved the problem of million years of conflict. We are continuing same pattern. We must find intelligently, hesitantly, with care, if there is a way of, is there a perception which covers the whole of conflict, and that very perception breaks up the pattern. Right? Now, how shall we meet this together? You see, the speaker has put this question forward. It may be wrong, it may be silly, irrational, but if you have listened to it very carefully, if you have listened, it is our responsibility, yours as well as mine, as well as the speaker, to see if it is so, if it is possible. Right? Not say, well, it's not possible because I have done it. It's not within my sphere. I haven't thought enough about it. Or I don't want to think about that way at all, because I'm satisfied with my conflict, because I'm quite certain one day humanity will be free of conflict. That's all just an escape from the problem. Right? Are we together in this now? Together, being aware of all the complexities of conflict, aware, not denying it. It's there. It's there as actual as pain in the body. It's there. One is aware of it. Aware without any choice. It is so. And at the same time, asking the question whether there is a different approach to this altogether. Vous avez compris? Now, can we observe, doesn't matter what it is, without the world, without the naming, without the remembrance? You see? Can you do it? To look at your friend or your wife or your whatever it is, to observe the person without the word, my wife, my friend, We belong to the same little group. Without any of that to observe, which is not observed through remembrance. Can you do it? Can we do that? Have you ever directly tried it? Now as you're sitting there, can we do it together? That is, not only look at the person without name, without time and remembrance, and also at ourselves. You understand? The image that we have built about ourselves, the image which we have built about the other, to look at that image without any, as though you're looking at it for the first time, looking at a rose for the first time. Will you do that? That is to learn to look. Learn to observe this quality without all the operation of thought. Don't say it's not possible. So it's like going to a professor, not knowing your subject, his subject, but you want to learn from him. I'm not your professor. You want to learn from him. So you go to him and listen. You don't say, I know something about it, or you're wrong, or you're right, or I think I don't like your look. You listen. You find out. And as you begin to listen sensitively, with awareness, you begin to discover whether it is a phony professor with a lot of words, or a professor that has really gone into the depth of himself. You understand? Now can we together so listen and observe without the word, without remembrance, without all the movement of thought, which means complete attention. Right? Attention not from a center to attain, but attention which has no center. Of course, if you have a center from which you are attending, that's merely a form of concentration. But if there is no center but you are attending, which means you are giving your complete attention, in that attention there is no time. Right? I want to say this. I'm listening. Suppose I'm listening to you. You're telling me a story. Story which is a story of myself, a story of mankind. You're telling me that story, and I'm listening to you because I don't know anything about it. But as I'm listening not only to what you are saying verbally, to communicate what you think, but in that very sensitive attention to listening, I am not only listening to the words, but I've gone beyond the words. I'm capturing the depth of the meaning of what he's saying. You understand? Are we doing this? Look, many of you, unfortunately or fortunately, have heard the speaker for many years. And you see, this breaking the program of the brain has not come about. And you repeat that statement over year after year. It hasn't come about. Is it because, please listen, is it because you want to attain, become, have that state of brain in which the pattern has been broken? You follow? That is, you have listened, it has not come about, and you are hoping it will come about, which is another form of becoming. Right? So you are still in conflict. And you say, well, you brush me aside, or say, well, I won't come here anymore because I haven't got what I want. I want that, but haven't got it. So the wanting is the becoming. Wonderful to see all this. The desire to be something is the beginning of conflict. And that desire is part of the programmed brain. And we are saying, to break that pattern, observe without the movement of time thought. Sounds very simple. But see the logic of it, the reason, the sanity of it. Not because the speaker says so, it is saying. So, one must exercise the capacity to be logic, rational, and know its limitation, because rational thinking, rational observation is still part of thought. And knowing that thought is limited, be aware of that limitation and don't push it further, because it will still be limited however far you go. Whereas if you say, now, can I observe a rose, a flower, without the word, without the color, just look at it. That looks brings about great sensitivity, breaks down this sense of heaviness of the brain. And gives extraordinary vitality, because thought has its own energy through conflict. Obviously. But there is a totally different kind of energy when there is pure perception, which is not related to thought. Right. I think that's enough for this morning, isn't it?